forward if you want. Okay, cool. Hello. Do you have another handheld one by any chance? Lapel mic. If you do. If you don't, it's okay. We've spent a lot of time looking at amazing journalism that's been done by people from all across the Arab region and around the world over the last 48 hours. We're going to be sharing a few strategies for how to share it. We're going to be talking about how social media can be used for incredible good. But I'd like to start with a little experiment. If I can grab a picture. You want to come here for 1 sec? Yeah, you. And let me just, you're a very dashing young man. Cameraman, can you shine some light on this man? Have you got a nice, yeah, there we go, come here. And if I take a picture of him, just like that, and I take a couple, you can use this as a passport picture. Thank you very much. And if I just go into an app like, just say Snapchat, and I scroll along to the very end, you guys know all these face filters, right? Funny face filters. And if I do something like that, I can effectively become him. Assalamu alaikum. I am from Jordan. I am assisting with the AV kits today. It's nice to meet you. See that? So, of course, it's not perfect. The audio could be better. Oops. Yeah, the audio could be better. But the fact is that I can use a basic app like Snapchat and I can manipulate his face. So if we are worried about fake news today and the lack of ability to verify even the most basic information, we have no idea how difficult verification and fact-checking is going to be tomorrow. In an age where even with a mobile phone I can manipulate somebody else's face, and the ability to manipulate his voice is not difficult. So we're entering a very, very tricky age. So social media can be used for immense evil. It can be used to really fool people, and I'm fully aware of the consequences of fake news and the ability to lie to people. But today we're going to be focusing on how social media can be used for social good. Is that mic on? Take my mic away from me.
Hello? Yeah, so even though social media can obviously do a lot of damage, in the wrong hands, it has the potential to do major social good. The aggregation of social media content has led to change and has sparked change from the Arab Spring to the Black Lives Matter. This example is of 7-year-old Bana Al-Abed, and she is from East Aleppo. And when there were no journalists around because it was far too dangerous to be in East Aleppo, Bana was, with the help of her mother, was live streaming on Periscope from East Aleppo.
Now, many traditional media would say Bana Al-Abed is not a journalist, she's not a reporter, her voice is not objective. I would say that it doesn't mean it's not of value. At a time where there were no correspondents in this region, it's about being able to contextualize who is Bana Al-Abed and why does she report with the help of her mother.
And we all know about the Black Lives Matter. A lot of the time it was the wives or families of the murdered young black men who were going live on Facebook, and that's how we saw firsthand exactly what was happening. It doesn't work.
In his wallet, out his pocket, and he let the officer know that he had a firearm and he was reaching for his wallet.
Yeah, so many. I think a lot of the first. Can you guys hear me? No. Okay. Yeah, no, it's just peeking. I think a lot of the witness accounts, a lot of the evidence that was presented around the Black Lives Matter movement would not have been there if it wasn't for selfie storytelling, if it wasn't for social media, of people going live with mobile phones, using it in their most dire moments to capture the gross injustices that were committed around them.
But in order to do social media for social good, we have to look not just at the publishing space when we talk about news publishing, we have to look at the news gathering space as well. Have any of you seen Snapchat maps? So Snapchat have a function where they have heat spots of lots of video coming in, lots of snaps coming in, and then they curate that video based on automated image recognition. And so they have aggregation on a scale that we can't even think of. So this was an example of the Las Vegas shooting that happened. So you just go into the map and you can go into the area. So this is just an example of using social media for the news gathering process and not just the publishing process.
And I think the point here is that as traditional media, we have already lost the breaking news game. Since 9/11, since the Twin Towers went down, it's been people with devices that have been on the ground when big stories happen, not broadcasters. And our role is fundamentally shifting from capturing the story first to aggregating the voices of people that are already on the ground. Because here in the Vegas shooting, long before traditional media could even deploy a camera, you had people broadcasting their stories.
Okay, so my name is Sumaiya Omar, and this is Yusuf, and we are the co-founders of #OurStories. And what we do is that we train communities around the world to tell stories using their phones, and then we gather all of those stories and we create shows out of them. We are mobile journalists. Everything that we do is on our phones, from the gathering process to the shooting of the story, to the editing, to the publishing. Everything is done mobile first. We are a completely mobile first strategy.
Yeah, so Sumaiya comes from a mobile banking background. I've been a correspondent with my mobile phone for about 10 years, starting in South Africa, covering most of the African continent. I was in Egypt during the first Arab Spring, then covering Syria during, I'll show you some of the videos. This is It started out in 2010. I hitchhiked from South Africa to Syria with a mobile phone, from Durban to Damascus up the east coast, 12,000 kilometers, telling stories with an old phone and a mobile device. This footage was shaky, it was handheld, the audio was terrible, and nobody cared. We were reaching what I call the YouTube generation, where we'd never been more forgiving of production values. All we wanted was a good, real, raw, and authentic story. In 2012, an ammunitions depot exploded in the middle of the Congo, in the middle of a civil population. This time, just like how I'm wearing glasses with cameras in them right now, I strapped a GoPro to my head and started doing wearable journalism. What I saw was what the audience saw.
It's essentially like walking through a minefield.
Using social media to give people a far more accessible look at a disaster zone. Instead of, hi, I'm Yusuf coming to you live from here, it's just a lot more casual, a lot more human. And in 2014, in Syria, we started getting into the idea of mixing formats, putting a live broadcast in this instance. We were smuggled into Syria with a group of surgeons that were building a hospital in Darkush, and during this live, a child died. And being able to put tweets on top of that, and put GIFs on top of that, and put photos on top of that, and create a mixed format. Unfortunately, everybody who I got close to during my time in Syria died. the person whose house I stayed at died, the translator I stayed at died, and now we are entirely relying often on the aggregation of people on the ground in Syria to hear what's happening in a part of the world where there are no correspondents. Since leaving Syria, we've dedicated my whole life to building mobile storytelling communities within existing areas, places that are not being heard. An example of that is in South Africa. I trained a group of 12 millennials, gave them iPhones, trained them for 3 months, and then sent them back out into communities to start telling stories with their mobile phones. That was a campaign called Boot Camp. So the idea of diversifying your social media coverage and your news coverage away from your formalized reporters and to your citizens effectively. We did the same thing in India at the Hindustan Times with 750 reporters. And then I moved to CNN in London last year and started testing this idea of doing social media for social good stories. We found that stories that were produced firstly on a mobile often performed better on mobile devices if you shot and edited on a mobile phone, because a lot of the considerations were for how a mobile audience wants to consume. But on top of that, we found a generation such as myself who, for our entire lives, we've been surrounded and inundated by terrorism and fear-mongering piped into our cell phones. We've only had negativity sent to us, and we don't share it, and it doesn't travel far online. We want to share optimistic stories, stories of hope, stories of change, stories of how we can make things better. Often with social media, the way somebody shares a piece of content is by the emotion that it evokes. Does it evoke a positive, hopeful message, or does it evoke a negative message? So we started looking at how we could look at what we call constructive journalism, constructive solutions-based journalism. This is not fluff, this is not good news, but simply looking at a problem in society and saying, here's a way that we as a collective can make it better. An example of that, working for CNN, I was in Germany and we met Syrian refugees that are doing walking tours of Berlin. And they're drawing parallels between Nazi Germany and Syria today. Another example is we were covering homelessness. Just hold for a sec. We were covering homelessness in the UK, and we found a former convict who had a double-decker bus. He previously used it, he was a prisoner for most of his life, and he bought a bus, and initially he had a strip club operating out of the bus, using the poles and everything. And then he's converted the strip club into a homeless shelter. He's put 12 beds, and now homeless people stay in the bus. And we, again, covering it entirely with a mobile phone.
So the ARIJ project is a bunch of former prison inmates and guys who have spent some time on the streets who managed to buy an old British bus. They've stripped out all of these seats and they're now installing sleeper pods for the homeless.
Beep, 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 beep. Welcome to the ARIJ project. I've been arrested for attempted murder, I've been arrested for a shooting. I've been in prison every single year up to 3 years ago since I was 15 years old. I asked the Lord into my life and I had a vision of helping homeless people. Just double-decker bus, kitted out.
So, like I said, we've co-founded #OurStories, and we go around the world training communities because for us, social media for social good is about constructive journalism, about solution storytelling, and we believe that this democratization of media that we have means that we have more cameras, which means more perspectives, which can only mean more truth. So we're currently on a tour of 25 countries around the world. I think this is 21 maybe.
It's even more than this actually, because I go to the US next.
Yeah.
And Palestine. Next year.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to all of these communities, from waste pickers in India to human trafficking survivors in Abu Dhabi, to refugees in Serbia. To all of these communities, we upskill them to be able to tell stories on their phones, and then we create narratives from these stories.
No, your mic is not.
Oh, sorry. So this is a... This is a little video of what we do and what we believe in.
We're the next billion mobile users, and we won't be silenced.
empowering mobile storytellers to bring about reform.
We don't need satellite trucks, and that's a fact.
Faster and cheaper than that.
Good storytelling has always been about more voices, and mobile cameras simply means more choices.
With more angles, perspectives, and truth than before.
There's a different way of telling stories.
We need to explore. Let's not ignore traditional media success, but surely we're better than this.
Our stories are being drowned, and the conversation has ended.
Truth and trust have been lost, but mobile storytelling can mend it.
Finding narratives in the noise, we don't need to perform. Let's identify languages being lost in the storm. See, a lack of media diversity is what's really affecting me. We talk about fake news, but don't listen to enough real views.
We know misrepresentation can lead to wars, so this is our cause. Hashtag our stories. What's yours?
Yeah, so that's basically what we're trying to do. Find communities that have been ignored, forgotten by mainstream media, be that refugees, human trafficking survivors, any group of people that are not receiving enough press attention, train them up to tell stories with their phones and create shows out of that. And I believe that in an era where aggregation is entirely driving news today, where it's entirely based on finding the next viral video, finding what's breaking news online, verifying it. There's very little value in that for the media at the moment. I believe that we have to go a step further. We have to find niche, original content that other media are struggling to get access to. And one way of doing this is by enabling and training communities to tell their own stories.
So basically, we're going to talk to you about three different aspects today. The first is experience. We'll show you a couple of case studies that we've done with social media for social good. We'll then go into Empower, where we'll show you some mobile journalism tips and tricks of how we do it, and then also Engage, how we share that content and how you get it to travel really far.
So I want to tell you guys a story. 9 months ago, we trained a group of, about 10 months ago now, we trained a group of waste pickers, a group of people that collect garbage on the streets of India and recycle it into sort of goods. Or they pick up plastics and they'll sell those plastics. And we train them up how to tell stories on Instagram stories. And I'll just show you the training very briefly.
For 10 seconds and take a video. We're doing a mobile journalism session here in Azamadi with the community.
He says, I'm not going to give up because I need to eat.
बहुत सारे कबाड़ी भाई लोग खड़े हैं और वो छटाई कर रही कबाड़ियों की बस्ती है. With a lot of waste pickers, teaching them Instagram stories so they can tell their stories.
Amplify the voices.
Here's the thing, we didn't hear from these waste pickers for about 9 months. We didn't hear a single thing. No videos, no output, and we assumed that the training had failed. That they didn't have Wi-Fi access, that they maybe were too busy, they didn't have a need for this skills. And then the Indian government, about 2 months ago, raised the GST taxes on recyclable plastics, directly impacting the livelihoods of the waste pickers, directly impacting their ability to make money. And out of nowhere, we suddenly started seeing #WasteGST pop up on our social media timelines. And it was these very waste pickers. Thank you.
So at a time when they had nowhere else to go, no one was listening to them, they used that training and they decided to tell their own stories on Instagram stories. And then we saw Indian news media pick up their stories, and with the help of advocates and with the help of the media, the Indian government reduced the taxes on GST.
So there was a direct impact. Just a month ago, the Indian government reduced the GST taxes. So somebody listened to these selfie storytellers, somebody heard their stories, and it had an impact on a very micro, local level. We've just come from Abu Dhabi. We were working with human trafficking survivors at the AWA shelter. In previous years, have you got the example from the face filters? Yeah. In previous years, I've used face filters to hide identities, and we'll show you an example in a minute. But in this instance, these young women had been basically taken from Nigeria to Abu Dhabi on the premise of work, that they would become nurses or cleaners. On arrival, they were kidnapped and forced into prostitution. They effectively became sex slaves. And we met a group of these women that had been rescued. And one such woman was from Nigeria. She was not much older than 18, really didn't want to be on camera, as you can imagine. You don't want to be waving a big bright lights and a boom mic in her face when she's gone through such a horrific incident, and obviously she wants to maintain her dignity. So we were able to give her these glasses, and the glasses have got a camera in one side, and you press the button and it records. And she was able to tell her story through her own eyes, and there's a microphone in here, and we didn't have to do anything. She was totally in control of the narrative, and she was the camera. So looking at how a basic tool that was never designed for providing anonymity to a human trafficking survivor could be used to tell her story.
Another example is we met a group of refugees in Serbia, very young boys, and they had smuggled themselves from Afghanistan to Serbia, and we trained them how to tell stories using their mobile phones, and now they send us all of these stories all of the time. Because it's very difficult for us to get into the refugee camps, but they're already in there, so they can tell the stories in their own perspectives. This was a story that Uzair did, and it was about the difficulty of getting into school, into high school at the refugee camps.
Hello. Hello, guys. My name is Uzair Fakirzadeh. Today, I heard a lot of the guys they come and they want to enjoy and they want to learn new things from here. The biggest problem.
Any of you guys attend the movie last night? The film evening? Did some of you attend it? It was centered around the pictures of refugees arriving on the shores of Europe. For us, there's a huge problem with that kind of narrative and coverage. I've only seen images of brown men on rubber dinghies arriving on the beaches of Europe, and it's very difficult to relate to those characters and have any sort of empathy for people. So the effort with that young man, with Uzair, is really to put a face behind refugees and to actually draw parallels and say, he's a young man just like me. We both like the same football teams, and we have more in common than we have different. It's this idea that social media can be used to connect people, that engagement increases empathy. If you can create an engagement between somebody who's from the very right and somebody who's from the very left, it increases empathy. And isolation, if they separate further in our social media timelines and we start saying, this is a troll, let's not speak to this person, let's block this person from our social media, that isolates them, we get further apart. Working in India, in the same way that I used the face filter on this gentleman in the morning, we were telling the story of sexual abuse survivors, women that had been raped. And we climbed a mountain in Mysore, which is a town outside of Bangalore, with a group of 50 young girls who had been sexually abused, who had been raped. And they were climbing this mountain as a metaphor to overcome their physical and mental demons. In this instance, we were trying to look for a creative way to hide their identities while allowing them to tell their story. And we were able to use Snapchat face filters. They took the phone, they were able to flick through and pick a filter that would hide their face, and we were still able to see their eyes and their mouths and their nose and some of their expressions while allowing them to tell their story.
I was 5 years old when it happened.
Of course, it's not ideal. I wish that she wasn't wearing a dragon's face, but it gives you an idea of how we can look beyond the gimmicks and use social media for social good. Of course, these are very childish features, but if we look at social media as a tool and we say, how can we use this tool to do better storytelling, we will unlock new potential that we didn't think existed.
Go. Now, first happy kadre tumba.
So a couple of weeks ago, we did a collaboration with the UN around their 17 sustainable goals. And what we did on the day of the action campaign was that we took 17 storytellers that we had trained from around the world, and each told the story about one of the sustainable goals. This is Sonali. She did a story. She's from India, from a place near Delhi called Gurgaon, and she did a story about a community fridge that the community has set up where people can just come, people leave leftover food in there, and then the homeless people or whoever needs food can just come and take it from the fridge. But it's all about, like Yusuf said, creating this empathy and understanding what our communities can do.
It's a very, very special fridge. Come, Pakistan City का community fridge. इसके अंदर बहुत कुछ खाने को है, पीने को है, और ये खाना उसके लिए है जो भूखा है, who is hungry. So anyone who wants clean, hygienic food and is looking for food, वो तो क्या जितने भी guards हैं, ladies हैं, ayahs हैं, जो भी यहाँ work कर रहे हैं, आसपास उन सबको fridge के बारे में मालूम.
Again, this is a hyper local story. It would never conventionally make our traditional news values. It's just a fridge in a little town in India where people are leaving their old food. But that is where mobile journalism comes into its element. It's the ability to reach hard to reach stories that traditional media struggle to access. The mainstream media are designed for the most universal story, generalizations. It's mobile journalists, it's people with mobile phones who reach parts of the world in stories which the world needs to know, and are able to do it in the most cost-effective way. And that's why we can get these really niche stories, and you can produce really original content. So social media for social good is not just a philanthropic aim. It's not really, oh, we really want to do good news stories. It actually does two things. Firstly, it helps us find hard-to-reach stories, and these stories travel further online because people want to share good news.
Yeah, so we're finding on social that constructive journalism, solution storytelling travels much faster than bad news, especially on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Like Yusuf said, it says something about people when they share stories that are constructive, so people tend to share them more.
And I think this is a great example. This is a NewsWhip survey that was done recently. And it shows you the top 10 Facebook posts from publishers over the last few months. And the vast majority are driven by social media for social good. Arnold Schwarzenegger has a blunt message for Nazis. That's a social media for social good story. The world needs more fathers like this. Again, optimistic, positive storytelling. The real power of sign language. We're seeing time and time again that the best performing stories are not negative. The old maxim in news was, if it bleeds, it leads. This is a saying that came from the Vietnam War, that if you splashed bloody front pages of newspapers, you sold more newspapers. This is not the same for social media. We're finding an ecosystem on Facebook where positivity prevails.
Also, as you can see from these stats, a lot of this comes from the Daily Mail, unfortunately. So there's definitely a space in the journalism space to be creating more constructive storytelling, because a lot of the top videos come from constructive storytelling stories.
Okay, we've given you guys a bunch of experiences. We now want to spend some time. How long have we got left? Because we've got a bunch of stuff to get through. 10:30 finishing on the time now?
We have an hour and we have an hour.
We have an hour. Would you rather focus on, as a collective, just by show of hands, would you rather focus on number one, which is workflows and structure for a newsroom, if you wanted to implement mobile storytelling as an organization? Or two, would you rather focus on practical apps and tools and how to produce these stories? So one for workflows and strategy stuff, and 2 for tools and apps and stuff.
Okay, so 1, everyone for 1.
I don't know if there's time. There's an hour and a bit?
1 hour.
Should we try and do both? Okay, let's race through it. We'll try and do both.
Okay.
Let's start with derivative content strategies. So this is moving a little bit away from social media for social good, but it's looking at how we actually produce these stories, which I think is important to you, right? You've been sold that it's valuable, now you want to know how to do it. So effectively, we live in an ecosystem where we want to be able to repurpose the same piece of content as effectively as possible for the greatest number of platforms. We want the highest return on investment.
Yeah, so when we talk about the highest return on investment, we mean that what takes the lowest amount of effort versus giving you the highest amount of reach in terms of engagement, in terms of shares, and things like that. So.
Yeah, okay, so right down the bottom of our pyramid is live video. We believe that is the biggest return on investment. It requires the least amount of work and you get the highest reward in terms of Facebook claim that a live video gets 10 times more views, 10 times more comments than a normal video. And we've seen this to be true. And effectively, it's very little resources have to be developed into it. If you train somebody and say, hey, just hit the red button and go live, it's very hands-off. There's no editing process. There's not much work that you have to invest into that piece of content. We're going to go through 10 tips for how to do really good Facebook Lives. And we're going to do it live. So let me grab your phone. I'm going to do it on, can I use your Instagram stories? Cool. And you can open it up. Okay, so here's the 10 tips. Take a picture of them. Okay, cool. The first one, why do we watch, okay, Sumaiya, you want to jump onto your Instagram? Sorry, on my phone. Cool. Why do we watch sports live, guys? Why do we watch sports live? It's the ultimate in suspense, right? It's the idea. Is anybody uncomfortable being on camera? Everyone's okay? Yeah. You can kill that audience. Yeah, so we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know whether there's going to be, we don't know whether there's going to be an...
Sorry.
Okay. The reason we watch sports live is because we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know if there's going to be an A or a B, which team's going to win. Even the person holding the camera, even the people that are anchoring the show, they don't know what's going to happen. That's why we watch sports live. In the same way, when we are doing live broadcasts, we need to create an element of suspense. An A and a B, 2 different options. It's so important to any live broadcast to create this idea of suspense. The second concept of live broadcasting is engagement. The fundamental difference between television and live streaming is this. It's the comment section. It's the ability for people to engage and converse with you in real time around what's happening. So you need to create live content which makes the most of the live stream, which makes the most of the comment section, which encourages people to converse with you. How do we do this? Well, in its very most basic sense, I was once doing Ramadan coverage in India. And I said, hey, audience, I'm live. I'm in the middle of an old mosque, just had iftar. You tell me what to do. And the audience says, okay, go over there. And I walked over there. And they said, eat that kajur, the dates. And I eat the dates. And they were totally in control of operating the camera. At the very best, if you can find that intersection between suspense and engagement, the two together, you have a very powerful piece of live content. An example of that, I was once covering in India, you know the sketches that the police do that leads to an arrest, the sketch artists. 2% of those were accurate. They weren't accurate. So what I did was, in the corner of the screen, I showed the audience an Indian wrestler, a famous Indian wrestler. And in the comments section, they had to describe what he looked like. And based on the description, a sketch artist had to draw it. Do you understand? So at that point, you are at the intersection of suspense and engagement. Suspense of if they don't, of finding out what the drawing is going to look like. Will it look like what we think? And engagement, if they don't converse, there will be no drawing. So Trying to find that, and you can find that in any story. You just got to think hard about how can I make this suspense-driven and how can I create engagement. Going back to our other points? I think that will cut the live, but we'll see. Oh no, you're on that one. Getting out of the studio. We're on a mobile, so why do we need to be in a studio doing head and shoulders, hi, this is a news show? We can be radically different. If we're talking about a sports game, let's be at the stadium. If we're talking about the wall separating Israel and Palestine, let's be at the wall doing the live. We don't need to be in a studio doing these kinds of crossings. We're on a mobile, so let's be mobile. Changing the format. We can radically change the format of live broadcasting. Again, it doesn't have to be anchors in a studio. We can change the way live broadcasts function. Scheduling, letting your audience know well in advance that you're going to go live. If we're going live at 5 o'clock, why not put out a tweet at 3 o'clock? Scheduling. Good internet. Of course, at best, you want a 3 or a 4G signal, maybe Wi-Fi, but sometimes that's not available. In iOS, you can go to Wi-Fi Assist. And you can take the best of both your cellular or your Wi-Fi. It's a setting in your cellular settings. Introducing the subject often. Our research has found that the average Facebook Live viewer watches for just 7 seconds. The retention is as short, if not shorter, than normal video. You have to keep reintroducing the subject. Radio presenters are really good at this. Hi, if you're just joining us, we are talking about 10 tips for live streaming. And a couple minutes later, hi, if you're just joining us, we're still talking about 10 tips for live streaming. Continually resetting the stage, reintroducing. There's nothing wrong with repeating yourself because the person watching 1 minute in is not the same person watching 5 or 10 minutes in. Adding text. On a normal Facebook video, 70% of your audience are not listening to the audio. On a Facebook Live, 90% are not listening to the audio. So how can we create an environment where you can consume the content without any audio on, creating audioless experiences? Number 9, time. We've trained ourselves for the longest of time to think that our generation has attention deficit disorder and we must package everything into a minute or less. But on a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live or a Periscope Live or an Instagram Live, it takes a long time for the audience to find out that we are live. So I say at a very minimum, you should be 10 minutes in length. We should go long. Sumaiya, isn't your phone still live?
No.
Oh. And finally, be cautious. With a live broadcast, there's very little editorial process in the ability to stop something going out when it's live. I was once in South Africa covering xenophobic uprisings. Foreign nationals were being set on fire by locals with tires set around them. And I joined the police and the military as they raided the homes of people suspected of carrying out these crimes. And I went live. And in this instance, I was revealing the faces of people that were being treated like suspects but hadn't served their day in court. In the same way, if you're dealing with children, if you're dealing with sexual abuse survivors, we can't risk showing what's happening. It's the same again if I go back to, if you were in Palestine and we were doing home evictions. If you are live, you may be revealing women, children in these scenarios, and you've got no way to shelter your audience from that, and you've got no way to hide their identities before going straight to air. So I now train people to film the ground and speak of what they're seeing and then reveal the camera as and when they have first analyzed it with their mind. Your eyes should be your first point of editorial sort of decision making. Any questions on the 10 tips for Facebook Lives and live content, guys? We've gone through a lot, haven't we? We're like kind of racing on. On the last day, you're like, 3 days and you're doing this? An example of suspense, protests in India. We're at the Hindustan Times where I was working.
College, this is Hindustan Times, and we are outside Ramjas College, where there is a struggle going on between ABVP students and other students. Ramjas students and Delhi University students are protesting against the ABVP, who yesterday forced the college to withdraw invitation to Omar Khalid.
A protest is an easy example of suspense. There's always some action, some drama. It lends itself. Getting outside, we were covering elections, and this is simply a reporter with a selfie stick.
So we are here covering Goa elections, and we have voters here who have just voted They've just come out of the polling booth.
Silent, we talked about doing lives without audio, sometimes being able to do it just with sheets of paper to explain what's happening.
In 30. 29.
Using a whiteboard as a simple format to be able to do live broadcasts. Again, audio-free experience. And I said, you're on a mobile, be mobile. Hey, what's Uber up, protests, and we were actually inside Uber cars doing a live broadcast explaining what the Uber protest was all about.
It's been now day 5.
Okay, so we spoke about the bottom of the triangle, which is live. Just above that is what we like to call almost live. And what that is the stories format. And when I mean the stories format, I mean those little circles that you see at the top of all of your timelines. Snapchat stories, Instagram stories, Facebook stories, WhatsApp stories, Skype stories. Everybody has the stories format. And what it is 3 things. The first thing is that it is mobile and vertical. So the stories format is made for mobile consumption. It's optimized for mobile. That's why it's vertical. The second thing is that it's ephemeral. Snapchat stories are 10 seconds and then they disappear after 24 hours. Instagram stories are 15 seconds and they disappear after 24 hours. And a lot of journalists and a lot of people get very afraid when we say ephemeral, that it disappears because we want our content to be evergreen. But if you just think about the fact that you can save that content and you can repurpose it across other platforms as part of your other stories. And the third thing, the most significant difference between the stories format and every other format is the fact that it's a lean forward approach. When we watch a YouTube video, when we're watching TV, it's a lean back approach. But when we're watching a stories format video, it's lean forward. You have to tap to go forward, tap to go backward. You have to screenshot. It's a very interactive sort of experience as opposed to every other format that we've seen. So the camera has become the mechanism of communication. All of these apps, Snapchat, Instagram, they open up into the camera because people are so willing to share their lives, and everyone has become a content creator because of the fact that there's a mobile phone in everybody's hands. So stories is a mix of photos, videos, text, graphics, GIFs, memes, basically all of these other formats that are fit into this one vertical format. So this is basically the circles at the top. You'll see them, and if you click on one of those circles, they'll come up into some kind of story. So if there's one thing I can leave you with when I talk about stories, it's the fact that we need to look beyond the gimmicks. People often get carried away by the fact that you can do doggy filters and that it's very childish and frivolous in a lot of ways. But like you can see in Yusuf's story with sexual abuse survivors, that a lot can be done. The technology is there. The technology behind these apps is amazing. And we need to use that technology and harness that technology to tell better stories. So there's 2 things when we talk about stories that I want to touch on. The first one is creation, and the second one is curation. So for creation, what we do with Snapchat, because we don't necessarily use it as a distribution tool, it's very hard to discover people on Snapchat, and it's not an easy tool to use for distribution. Instagram is a lot easier. Facebook is a lot easier because it's easier to find people. We use Snapchat and we use Instagram stories as well as a content creation tool. We create our content because of the fact that it has all of these tools that are simple and easy to use and that is already built into this one experience. So I can take a video and I can add text immediately. I can add emojis. I can add all of these different layers of information very quickly and very easily. So we use it as a content creation tool. We download it, we save it, and then we use it to be repurposed across other platforms and as part of other stories. So this is a story that Yusuf did in India. It was an investigative piece that he did on Snapchat, and it was about, Yusuf, I don't know if you want to explain it.
It was about the sale of drugs in the state of Punjab. We heard that there were a lot of drugs Punjab, and the benefit of covering the story on Snap.
There we go.
The benefit of being able to, so this story was about drugs in the state of Punjab, and we filmed it on Snapchat for a bunch of reasons. Firstly, because we thought that a young audience would be on Snapchat who may be affected by the drugs. But even more so, Snap is effectively a cloud-based solution. You hold down the red button for 10 seconds, you film a shot, and you press send, and it sends it up. And you press another shot, and you press send. I was traveling out, trying to buy drugs to see how easy it was, and I worried that the police could arrest us, that the drug dealers could steal our phones. So Snapchat offered a cloud-based solution where I could just hold down the red button and shoot and send and send and send. On top of that, every single shot adds to your narrative. So it created a sense of suspense. People were with me throughout the entire evening. Will he get the drugs? Will he get arrested? What's going to happen? So there was a natural sense of suspense baked into the story.
It's pretty scary right now. I've come to Punjab to do a fluff piece on a new film, but the big talking point in this stage is drugs. I'm gonna go undercover. This looks way too formal. Okay, that's probably a better balance. So we're leaving the hotel now. The time is 11:40. Alright, we've got our first ride. Alright, so things seem to be working out. The auto driver says he knows the place. He's taking us there right now. It's pretty scary right now. We are in a back street, an area quite far away.
We are at Khoda Colony, Shimlapuri, and the auto guy has gone to get us some coke.
Alright, so the auto driver's gone off to buy the stuff. Says it'll be better if he gets it without us.
So there's a couple of elements to that story. The first one, like Yusuf said, was suspense. The other one is that it's a very native and niche to the platform. It's not repurposed content from TV that's onto Snapchat or that's on any of these platforms. Yusuf obviously has enough personality to carry the story forward. He's also using like the text and stuff that's already in, that you can already do inside of Snapchat, so he's not bringing in other things. It's very native to the platform. Another story is one that AJ Plus did, and this was on Instagram stories, and they used the polling feature, and this was around the Me Too campaign. And it's a very interesting, very simple way of telling a story or of interacting with the audience. So on these platforms, what happens is that you are broadcasting one-to-many, but you're chatting and you're interacting with your audience one-to-one in the chat sections. So this was a good example of creating that really interactive content. It's just a series of questions that people would answer.
So you click on the left and the right and you get data.
This is another example where you can use filters. So on Snapchat you can buy these filters and they're not very expensive, but yeah, so this is just using the filters for social good. This is a piece by The Guardian. It's an explainer piece on what is Ramadan. Again, using this platform, using Instagram stories to help people understand topics that they might not otherwise understand, or creating these explainer style of videos. Using emojis and all of the
Ramadan
elements.
is a holy month for Muslims where we fast during daylight hours.
Again, a very simple concept of question and answer.
Fasting includes abstaining from eating, drinking, and having sex from dawn till dusk. You're also supposed to cut down on other vices like gossiping, swearing, and fighting.
So for me, curation is the really interesting part about this platform. So Snapchat curates videos from their 177 million users based on video image recognition and location. Instagram curate based on locations and hashtags. Snapchat claim to have over 1 million live stories a day. And what they're doing is they're curating from all of these snaps and all of these videos that are coming in. For breaking news, it means that Snapchat can aggregate content and they can publish content far quicker than traditional media can even deploy their cameras. This was an example of the London attack. And they're already adding a lot of context to these stories and giving us more information. And the perspectives are of people on the ground, of what's actually happening. So media houses can do two things with curation and with Snapchat storytelling. The first one is verification. Some of CNN's first verified footage of the Paris attack was from a Snapchat story. But it's not just for breaking news. Some of the best use cases have been from stories about hard to reach places and people and sensitive subject matter. This one is from the day after the Trump's inauguration.
Happy Inauguration Day, everyone. Today is a day to be respectful and to celebrate the peaceful transition of power in our democracy.
How did this happen? This is 2017. This is Trump's America. This is what all these people waited.
So it's just a whole other perspective. I'm not going to go through those. Okay, so how do we gather stories on Snapchat? How can we use these features, these curation possibilities on Snapchat and Instagram? So the first thing that we have to understand, like Yusuf was saying, that everybody has a cell phone and everybody has become creators. So we have to understand that our audience are no longer just our audience, but they are our creators as well. So at the Hindustan Times, where Yusuf was working, he was telling the story of education. And I guess Yusuf can tell it better.
Yeah, education's boring and difficult to tell because it's the same calendar event every year. This many students apply, this many people get into college. We trained 6 students, 6 young people, how to use Snapchat, and we had them Snapchat the most stressful 6 weeks of their lives trying to get into university. And every week we got a different story about their politics with their family, about trying to get a residence, about their sex lives, all these different dynamics.
6 people.
6 goals.
6 ideas. 6 dreams. But one objective.
To make their summer the best days of their life.
This is the first ever Snapchat reality.
So this is basically how Instagram curates. It's all based on hashtags and based on location stories, and that's how you can find it just in the explore section. And it's very interesting, and I showed you an example before, but this is how Snapchat is displaying their curation is on a map. We did that. And Facebook and Periscope have taken it a step further where they're curating live videos. And they're also displaying it, Facebook is displaying that on a map. And these live videos are also tending to look a lot like the stories format where you can draw on it, you can add face filters and that kind of thing. So it's all starting to look a lot like the stories format, even though it's live. Okay, so that was stories.
Okay, so we've done lives, we've done stories. Any questions about those two? Nothing? So the whole idea of a derivative content strategy is that the bottom produces the next. So you have a newsroom where you take everything live, and from your live broadcast, you're able to produce stories formats. You're able to cut 10 seconds out of it from this 10-minuter. The next thing we want to talk to you guys about is explainer pieces. Yesterday, the gentleman at the back, his workshop, they looked at AJ Plus explainers, the 1-minute video with text, with music, with images, right? You guys know what I'm talking about when I say explainer format? Yeah, the very basic 1-minute videos. I'll show you how to make those really quickly on your mobile phone. I've got a bunch of apps that I want to show you, but one of them is called Quick, Q-U-I-K. It looks like that. It's owned by GoPro. effectively, you press this. These are all free, by the way. So you press the plus button, and we're going to grab a couple images. So let's go with the ones yesterday. I snuck out for a little bit. Don't tell anybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to press the done button. And these are different transitions. Each of them has different subtitles, different themes, different music. So pick whichever one. Cool. Once you picked one, you're going to click on the bottom here. And we're going to press text. And you can add a line of text to each of them by pressing the T button for text. And you can say, hey, this is the Wadis in Jordan, or something like that. Yeah, it does. The water's warm. The next one, that's my baby brother. If you want to go to the Wadi, by the way, it's about a 10-minute drive down the road. Great swim. Okay, cool. You press the OK button. And within a couple minutes, you've created a... And we're going to lose that, delete that ad because they don't pay us. Easy, right? If I want to change the... if I click on the bottom left, I can change those, try a different theme, different subtitles, different look and feel.
And you can change the music as well. Yeah.
Cool. Any questions about Quick? They call it Quick because it's really quick, it's free, it's easy to use. Q-U-I-K. So, your live format creates your stories. From your stories, you can create your explainer. This is all one derivative content strategy. It starts with the baseline of a live. All right, on top of that, you have the Mojo piece. The Mojo piece is the ability to shoot, to edit, to produce on your phone. The most viral video I've ever made got 4 million views in the first 4 days and is now sitting on 8 million views. It's a piece called The Ugly Indian. I was walking around India in Bangalore and I saw a group of people cleaning up the streets. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, no, we are ugly Indians. We believe that India is dirty because we make it dirty, all of us. And we must be responsible for cleaning it up. It took me half an hour to film with my phone. It took me half an hour to edit. That's it. All on the mobile device. Shot, edited, produced, and it's on 8 million views. Let's watch it and then work out some of the aspects as to why it went viral.
That guy is urinating on the wall. Are you an ugly Indian? All of us here are the ugly Indians.
This place smells like urine. A lot of urine.
This is our problem. The Ugly Indian is a Facebook group that focus on spot fixing. Spotting an ugly part of their towns or their cities and fixing it.
It's meditation.
It's about the broken window theory, that if an area is ugly,
ugliness attracts ugliness.
But if you can make it beautiful, people will look after it.
Make the space look like somebody's taking care of it.
The tragedy of the commons. We protect our private spaces, but we neglect public areas.
Erase the signs of neglect, which is the posters on the wall and installing symbols of respect. The picket fence kind of a design, sharp edges, triangles, actually works on the psychology of the onlooker that we should not mess up with this space.
In India, there's a real problem of people spitting tobacco to paint the bottom of the street red. So if they are going to spit into that corner, it'll be less visible. But of course, you can't really fix a problem just by painting over it. This is positive, disruptive anarchy.
How to influence people's psychology.
And it's largely based around Facebook. You take a picture before and you take a picture afterwards.
Before and after makes larger impact than that of words.
Nobody's being paid to do this. This is not even an NGO. It's just an idea, the Ugly Indian, to make India more beautiful.
That we are all the ugly Indians because unless and until we accept the fact and assume the responsibility of the dirt and filth, we won't be able to solve it.
Have you had an impact on your street? Let us know and share this video.
So, a few aspects to that story. Firstly, big chunky text because obviously it's on Facebook and people are not listening to the audio. In terms of the structure of the narrative, it's very simple. I did an interview and then I filled in the gaps with my own voice. He talks, I talk. He talks, I talk, which makes it very, very easy to edit. In terms of the way that it attracts the audience. In the first 3 seconds, which is the autoplay, where in Facebook it plays before you have a choice, I don't show you a beautiful shot and say, this is India. I say, this guy is urinating. It automatically grabs your attention. I then ask provocative statements. Are you an ugly Indian? I then lead with a series of emotions. Only 12 seconds into the narrative do I start saying the who, where, what, when, why, how. This is the ugly Indian, they're about this, X, Y, and Z. So it's all about attracting the audience's attention right up the top. Facebook and YouTube work on the amount of people that talk about a story at any given time, the amount of engagement around a story. We spark engagement by asking the audience provocative questions. At the very end, have you had a positive impact on your community? Share this video and let us know. Encouraging the audience to say something positive about themselves. Social media for social good also implies that your audience can share their social good stories. Again, social media is all about looking at what emotion we evoke in the audience when we create a piece of content. Any questions about the story or about producing videos on your phone? No? Okay, just to show you guys how easy and quick it is to produce something like this. If I was to open up the camera right now, yep, it's fine, you can put it sideways, and we say, hey, we are doing a workshop here at ARIJ in Jordan. It's been fantastic working with the best journalists from around the region. It's great to have them, and the two women at the front are taking more notes than anybody else I've ever seen before. It's amazing to have them on board. Thank you. And then we get some cutaways, so we're going to shot of the two women. And we said that they're taking notes, so we have them taking notes, like such. And we'll get a wider shot. And maybe we'll get a shot of our name signs behind you. And we're going to jump into an app like iMovie. iMovie is free on iOS devices, or KineMaster on an Android device, K-I-N-E-M-A-S-T-E-R. And we're going to first grab the video of me talking. We're going to say create video. And we're going to scrim to the front. And we'll start with a wide shot. So we're going to press the plus button. And we're going to go videos. And we're going to go all. And we're going to grab that shot. And we're going to press the 3 dots. And we're going to say add. Cool. And we're going to scroll along. And somewhere there, we'll press the plus button. We're going to take our names. And we're going to press the 3 dots. And we're going to say add. And we're going to go to the very end. And we're going to take those two women. And we're going to take that, 3 dots. And we might need to move the second one just to the name belt's a little bit to the left. We're going to lift it up or hold it down. And we're going to drag that there, yep. And we're going to press the bottom right, and we're going to add music, and we're going to add fade out to black. We're going to say OK, and we're going to scroll to the front, and we're going to press play. Cool, easy, right? Within 10 seconds, you can produce a piece of video which is appropriate to put online. And that's how you produce a Mojo video. So that's part 4 of our pyramid. And then right up the top of the pyramid is where I start getting into, I mean, in my bag, I carry a drone all the time. I carry a 360 camera. These are all very, very important formats and are increasingly becoming more important, but they occupy the smallest part of the pyramid because they really are at the moment, I suppose, require the biggest amount of effort which you've got to place in. But I still think they're critical because this is where your innovations happen. And this rapidly becomes this. In 2018, I'm going to be entirely doing 360 video. It's going to be the baseline of my pyramid. And from the 360, I will repurpose stories, formats, explainers, Mojo. But 360 is going to form the base. So this is constantly shifting. Your strategy is constantly changing as a load of social media apps come available. Any questions about any of that? Guys are happy? Yeah? Okay, how many minutes we got left? Half an hour. Let's go through 7 tips for how to pull this off in a news organization. And it starts with, I guess you can do it on Snapchat, are you? Mm-hmm. It starts with removing removing the Zs. So when I look at any news organization, one of the biggest struggles when it comes to social media is that we take broadcast and newspaper style workflows and try to apply them to social media. So when I say remove the Zs, I mean somebody produces a piece of video as a reporter. They then have to often send it up to the video team, who then have to send it to the social media team, who then have to send it to the online team. And effectively, you end up creating these enormous Zs in your workflow, which slows down your process and involves more resources than are needed. Effectively, one of the greatest benefits of social media is that you can go directly from content creation straight up to publishing. So where can we create that kind of a workflow where we have a direct line between the creator and straight up to Facebook, straight up to YouTube, straight up to Twitter? Of course, the big reservation is, well, Yusuf, we have important brands, right? We have big Arab news organizations. How can we have an intern publishing straight up to our Facebook account? I believe we have to take a traffic light approach to storytelling. Not all stories are the same, so why do we have the same social media policy for them? If you guys were reporters covering this event right now, it's a green light. Not much can go wrong. So why not enable your reporters to go live on Facebook? If a minister is being caught in a brothel, pants down, that's a red light. It's a sensitive story. We should probably reintroduce those checks and balances. We should reintroduce that kind of a workflow. But not all stories are the same, so we don't need to treat them the same on social media. The next concept is survey your newsroom. If you're going to build a mobile journalism newsroom, we need to find out what kinds of devices exist within your newsroom, what kinds of phones people have, and what kind of content they are consuming. When I surveyed the newsroom at the Hindustan Times, we found 75 different types of phones in one newsroom. The big F word for mobile storytelling is fragmentation, right? When training people, it's difficult when you've got phones ranging from a $4 phone, a Freedom 251, which is a smartphone with 2 cameras for $4, up to an iPhone 7 and everything in between. So survey the newsroom and find out what kinds of kit they have. The next concept is cut the fat. Cut the fat. When I go to most newsrooms, I find so many online video formats that are not performing well. And I say to people, well, why are you doing these formats? And they say, well, we always done them, that's why we do them. And if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. I'm not sure how that translates into Arabic. So, cut the fat, and it's so easy to do. Effectively, the online space is like cricket. There's analytics. You can find out exactly what is doing well and what's not. The next concept is to gamify the newsroom. When I look at the BBC and other major organizations and they want to create mobile storytelling newsrooms, they simply give kit to everybody. They say, hey, here's 50 iPhones, let's do something. And these kit end up collecting dust because you're giving people more stuff and more work with the same salary. But if you gamify the newsroom and you say, hey, if you get 50,000 views, I will give you a tripod. If you get 100,000 views, I'll give you a microphone. If you get 500,000 views, I'll give you a brand new phone. If you get 1 million views, I'll give you a 360 camera. You get 2 million views, I'll give you a drone. You end up gamifying the newsroom and rewarding people based on the output of video that they create. The next concept is take it live. Of all of the formats, all of the time, the highest return on investment is the ability to take it live all of the time. And can we just go back to the gamify? I just want to show a structure of how that might look. So, not all mojo storytellers are made the same. So why do we treat them the same? If we think about training people up, and you've got a baseline of people with a variety of devices that are producing video on your phone, I then suggest that this tier of people, say, that have got under 10,000 views or shares or likes, or whatever you want to call it, they then send their videos up to people who are then mojo influencers. These are people that have got 50,000 views. They've gained the tripod or whatever you've gamified them with. They've also gained access to platforms. If you've reached this tier, you've got access to your Facebook, your YouTube, whatever. These people then send the video up to this person, who's the mojo master in the newsroom. That person has access to the YouTube account. They can publish. So you end up keeping the mobile journalism workflow on the mobile devices as opposed to the Zs and bringing it onto desktops. And you end up decentralizing your social media policy. In most newsrooms around the world today, we have a sports team, a business team, a weather team, and a social media team. And the social media team, no matter how big you build it, it's always inundated. It's always a big bottleneck of people sending stuff in. But if you have a Mojo influencer within your business team, a Mojo influencer within your sports team, your expertise in the social media space are baked into the entire newsroom. So then you don't end up with a Mojo or mobile journalism team or vertical, or a social media team or vertical, but a social media newsroom where everybody is empowered, where everybody can make decisions and control their parts of the pyramid.
Pick a day.
What's that?
Pick a day.
The next concept is pick a day. This is point number 5, is it? Find a day of the week and call it your training day. I used to call it Mojo Mondays. And on that one day of the week, anybody can come in and learn some skills. And I would open this up from the janitor, the cleaners, to the editor-in-chief. Because you don't know who is going to be there at a time when a big story is going to break. So I believe we should empower everybody with the skills to tell stories using their mobile phones.
Social media formats.
And finally, develop social media formats. Develop formats this is not television, so why do we keep bringing bad broadcast habits onto the online social media space? We can fundamentally change the formats, and at the heart of this change of formats is the interactivity of video today. YouTube and even TV are lean back experiences. We watch it and we absorb. The stories format that we spoke about on Instagram and Snapchat is interactive. You press the screen to move and skip 10 seconds forward. We move from a scenario where we are trying to create thumb-stopping content, where we don't want people to press the screen, to thumb-engaging content, where we want them to click, where we want them to engage with the content as much as possible. So changing this formats. So that's the 7 tips for how to build a mobile newsroom. Of course, we can talk about it in much more depth, but it just gives you an idea of the kinds of strategies and workflows we have to build. I want to show you guys a couple more apps that you might find useful for creating content on your phone. The first one is called Video Leap. I can tweet this out afterwards, or you can take a picture, whatever you like. Video Leap is an example of an app where you can effectively mix content on top of each other. You can take video and top of video and create mixed formats. Placer.cam is a piece of app that allows you to put augmented reality text in the real world environment. So I can be speaking, you can have a piece of text, and you can zoom in and out of it. Hyperlapse, most of you are familiar with. It's a time-lapse feature which takes very still time lapses. It's like having a Steadicam in your pocket. LumaFusion, if you just open it up, is a full editing suite in your pocket. It is like having Premiere or Final Cut Pro. I'm editing something at the moment from China, so if you scroll to the very beginning, I just came from China. You've got numerous layers. You can have 2 layers of audio, you can have 2 or 3 layers of video. It's a full editing suite in your pocket, and you can just press play, whatever. You can put drone footage into it, you can put 360 footage into it. I don't use my laptop to edit anymore. I entirely use this piece of software. Clips is a nice one. This one's made by Apple. Anyone heard of Apple Clips? Sumaiya, you want to just give an example? Press the bottom left for that text. Just press, yeah. And so this one is really neat. Yeah, whichever. Hey, we are doing a demonstration of automated subtitling. How cool is that, guys? Real-time. We're doing a workshop right now. Hey, we are doing a demonstration of automated subtitling. Guys, the fact of the matter is any process that can be automated will be automated, and if we can get rid of the boring stuff like subtitling, we can spend more time focusing on the interesting stuff like good storytelling. That's one of my favorite apps in the world right now. iMovie, we spent some time looking at together. It was the way we created that Mojo piece that we were showing earlier. Quick is the piece we looked at doing the explainer pieces. Splice does vertical explainers, also very useful. FX Guru puts graphics, if you want to put straps and these kinds of things in your foreground. Pick, play, post is a nice one. Often you need to be able to create verticals out of landscapes or landscapes out of verticals. So you click a format, you click your aspect ratio. At the moment it's 1:1, but you can go 16 by 9, 9 by 16. So let's go 9 by 16 for example. 9 by 16 vertical. And let's click on this. And let's click on these three. And I can effectively take, let's take him.
I'll just take that.
And we can plonk verticals or landscapes into a vertical canvas.
Well, that's not it.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Anyone. And the bottom one. Yeah, you can pick whatever. And within a couple seconds, you press exit down the bottom right, and preview down the bottom right, and you can create.
I don't want to tell my brother this, but I'm actually super worried. It's just gone almost 5 o'clock soon.
You guys get the idea? Create landscapes to create a vertical canvas. Really useful function. Cool? And Video Scribe is one of my favorites. We showed it off yesterday in a quick workshop. The ability to create, you'll see. This is really neat. Press the plus button, text, ARIJ. It's done. Somebody's testing the apps. And yep, and we can make that bigger. And we can press the plus on top left, and we can go to, what should we type in, Earth? How good's the Wi-Fi in here? It's okay, I got another way of okay,
There
cool.
we go.
And grab an Earth. So this is something that would have taken a lifetime in the old days. Cool. And
Sorry.
yeah, and top left.
Wait, I just wanna.
She's a perfectionist. And press play, and you can do something like that. That's called Video Scribe. Cool, guys. We didn't take a break, so we'll let you guys go early. If you got any questions, we'll be around. Lots of questions. Thank you so much. It's really kind of you to come.
Does anyone have questions? Yeah.
And thank you, and sorry to the translators for speaking at a speed of.
Spectacles.
I can show you clips of the video. We haven't made that story public, but yeah, for sure. Just don't take any pictures because you might show the identities. But yeah, we can show it to you. Go stories, go down. So this is the memories function. If anybody didn't join us, we're talking about the idea of using these on human trafficking survivors in Nigeria, so that they could press the button and they could tell their stories. And the young woman's asking about some of the footage. What date did we do it?
October.
Human trafficking? Okay. So, here's some of the shots. I want you to do me a favor. Ignore this for a second and look at this.
Look at the phone.
Because this is clever. These take a round video, which means you can actually get the point of view of the woman from her perspective. So,
sorry, the internet is not happening right now.
play one of the ones that is working.
It is. This is one of the ones.
Oh. All right, when it comes through, we can show it to you. It's just loading up. We took hundreds and hundreds of shots of her. It was amazing. Like, so she was talking about, for example, basically, it's really interesting. The whole story of the human trafficking with the instance of the Nigerians starts with climate change. Because of climate change, they can't farm anymore, which means they have to move to urban cities, which means they have to find jobs overseas. So she's telling the story of how she used to be a farmer. And we were able to put the spectacles on her and send her out into the garden and actually have her farming. And it was just such an interesting way of capturing that. And still, the audio was amazing because the mic is on here.
This is about drawing, I think.
What's that?
This is the one about drawing.
Yeah, and in another instance, it's a very visually impossible story to tell, right? You don't know about the journey and how she traveled. So we had to wear the glasses and storyboard her entire journey out. So her drawing helped us understand the story, but it also helped create visuals around it.
Sorry, it's
All right, it's hard for us to click through, but you can see each, just go out. You can see each of these shots, right? So you've got her storyboarding, and then if we keep going down, this is how the whole story progressed in a series of circles. If you stick around later, once it loads up, we can show it to you.
But the whole point is that it records a round video, which you can then cut out verticals or horizontals or squares out of. So you don't really have to think about which way you're shooting. It shoots round, and you can repurpose any other format from it. But I'll just show it to you in it.
So I have a question about the platforms. You're obviously using all of them, Facebook, Snapchat. Where's your main audience? And can you tell us a bit about the profiles of different audiences at different platforms, social media?
It's a great question. Our primary platform at the moment is Facebook, but we are entirely platform agnostic, as you suggest. And the reason for that is largely because I don't believe in indebting my entire company to the success or failure of another company. If you build an entire audience on Facebook and one day Facebook decide, hey, your platform constitutes hate speech, and they drop you, you lose your entire audience and game over. In terms of profiles of each platform, what I will say is that I believe that we are all on social media trajectories. So if I look at my younger brother, he's 21. He is using Lively, he's using Musical.ly, he's using Snapchat, he barely touches Facebook. When I look at my generation, a generation of people who, my first experience of the internet was dial-up internet, his wasn't. I had an AOL account, for example. I had an MSN account. I am using WhatsApp, I'm using Facebook. I use Instagram not as much. If I look at my father's generation, he is a heavy WhatsApp user. He gets most of his information through portals still. Apple News is very big to him. So it's difficult for me to pinpoint an exact profile for each because it largely differs on your region. We find that in the Middle East, you get a slightly older demographic that are still using Snapchat, which is not the same in the US, for example. A very younger demographic are using Snapchat. But what I think is more interesting is to map out those trajectories, to say, this audience are on this trajectory and that we can target them at these points. So for me, if you hit me with a newsletter in my email, if you hit me with a WhatsApp group, and if I'm part of your Facebook group, you've got me. For my brother, if you are providing content on Musical.ly, on Lively, on Snapchat, you're on his trajectory. So picking those trajectories, because I don't think they're isolated to one platform, I think we travel. Hi.
I don't know if you talked about this earlier, but just wanted to ask, how do you get funded? I mean, you do a lot of travels, and that's one question. And the other one, do you work for someone or just you two alone? You have your own company. Number 3, how can we find you who want to follow like what you are doing?
That's really kind. Thank you for the questions. We're entirely self-funded. We have no financial backing. We have no affiliate organizations. We finance the amazing amount of travel that we do by basically doing what we're doing right now. We use conferences and we use events to get to countries, and then off the back of that we piggyback to do stories. So we came to Jordan and then we tried to do training with refugees. Unfortunately, we didn't succeed in this instance. There was permissions that were way beyond our control. At the moment, the money that we do make is from building mobile solutions within existing news organizations. So there's a real market in a time where newsrooms are tight on resources to be able to, the whole pivot to video, produce lots of video at a low budget. So we go into a newsroom, we're able to do that. We're also offering the service to especially public service broadcasters to be able to tap into hard-to-reach communities. So, for example, we were in Australia. ABC, which is their regional broadcaster, said, hey, we are struggling to get stories from Aboriginal communities. We go in, we train the Aboriginal communities in mobile journalism, we funnel that content, and we can create shows for that news organization. Something I was talking to a couple of people about at this conference was the idea that well, Nasser especially, we were talking yesterday about the idea that often this kind of journalism is neither viral video, nor is it Game of Thrones, right? The kind of work we do. So it's very difficult to monetize if it's not really at those two extremes. So what can you do is you can do the journalism effectively for free, which is what we do. And that becomes your market research and development. We learn the best storytelling techniques, and then you make your money from workshops, from events, from other spaces. Having said that, we are moving more and more into becoming a content creation company. We're moving more and more into providing shows to organizations. People are looking increasingly for original content, for hard-to-reach stories, and we are able to provide that. We are focused around 3 major areas, and these were not by design, but simply by the stories that emerged. Waste-picking communities have become very clear. Human trafficking and sexual abuse survivors have become another big theme, and refugees have been a third. Within those waste-picking communities, people that collect garbage. In Sri Lanka, in India, all over the world, we've been working with these communities. And within those 3 communities, we are able to tell many, many stories. I'm sure if I go to Gaza, I'll be able to find stories on human trafficking, on waste picking, on these 3 demographics. So those have largely driven the content. From those 3 groups, we are now looking at the possibility, I'm going to Chennai next week, of being able to create, at least as a pilot, a 24-hour news channel entirely on social media, entirely with citizens, telling stories with their phones. The capital investment is next to nothing. There's almost no money involved. So our overheads are incredibly low. You asked about that. You asked about
how to find us.
How do you find us? Hashtag our stories, primarily on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook is probably the best way to find us.
But add me as a friend on Facebook. So
hashtag
no, it's the actual word hashtag. Yeah,
it's the
word hashtag our stories.
Yeah.
Have these loaded yet? No.
Yeah.
Okay, so ignore this for a second, and maybe you can spin it. Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it does. So look at that. As she's spinning the phone, it's changing the orientation of the video, and this is from the spectacles. So this is the woman describing how she was a farmer before she was human trafficked. And look on the phone as opposed to on the screen.
Yeah, you have to look at it on the phone.
You're totally, so that's, and you can show other examples. This is the kind of content we've captured around.
This is when she was showing us the dress that they
made
her wear.
They made her wear when she was having to prostitute herself. But it's a different perspective, right? It's a point of view. You're really immersing yourself in the person's life. And this is the real, I suppose, in this whole social media for social good, it's this idea of looking beyond gimmicks, right? Looking beyond the childish nature of many social media products and seeing how we can use these to do effective journalism and storytelling. This was interesting. She was mapping her route from the African continent. So yeah. Any other? Yeah.
Are you building an archive? Because the stories you are covering is not just the things that worth just vanishing after 24 hours or so. Are you building for all these topics?
It's a great question. There's a massive misconception that Snapchat and Instagram and these ephemeral platforms only live for 24 hours. Firstly, what you're looking at right now is the memories. So we have our Snapchat set. So if you scroll up from the bottom, that everything we produce is saved to the memories. It's an unlimited archive of video, and it's well dated and curated, and it's actually a very, very good way to store your content in high definition for free. And you can go back, every single day of my life is captured in here. I don't capture things through my camera, I capture it through this app, right? And then I decide if I want to make it public. So yes, it's all safe. On top of that, we are simply using Snap and Insta as content creation tools. And Nasser calls it snackable content. We're using it as content creation tools, which we're then repurposing into all of these formats. So they're still living in full form in other places. So yes, absolutely, there's an archive of all of it. And it's all multi-pronged. It all starts with a live piece of content. And then we migrate that audience onto this. And then it starts with stories and we migrate it. So when you get that 8 million view video that I showed you, it's not a sudden miracle, but it's by virtue of having migrated so many audiences to that one space. And on the same respect, because we have built audiences around waste picking in India, when I do a waste picking story in Serbia, I have a captivated audience that like that content. So I drop links in the comments section of all my other videos on the waste picking topic saying, hey guys, you enjoyed this, come check it out. One of the things people don't appreciate enough about the Facebook like, the like button. Everybody thinks likes is a metric of how much people like that content. The like is also a permission to send a push notification to that individual every time the content creator comments on that video. So just go into Facebook, and so I can make myself clearer. Facebook. If you like a video, every time the content creator comments on that video, you will get a little notification say, hey, Yusuf just commented on a video that you liked. You can use that for months and years to come. And at the Hindustan Times, it's how we migrated audiences in such big ways. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah? Okay. Okay, here's an example. Here's a speech I did in Germany. It is about mobile journalism at CNN. Got 226 likes. When I comment in the comments section and I say, hey guys, check out my video from the ARIJ conference, all 226 people that liked it will get a notification to say, hey, Yusuf just said something about a video you liked. And they will then come to my next speech. So migrating audience is a very powerful way using your existing archive.
Or if you need to migrate them to like a website or something else, a bigger piece of content, you
Yeah.
just share
So
the
that
links
like
on
is
there.
such a powerful feature as a notification. Yeah. Any questions? All good? Sorry, I know you guys didn't get a break. It was all right. Thank you so much for coming, guys.
Thank you.
We'll be around if you want to chat.